Max Magic Supermarket and Class A liquor license. Well, it struck again, Alderman Marcus. Another business has got to suffer a little bit from our restriction on Class A liquor licenses. Apparently there's a restriction, I think that it's 24, but that's beside the point. The main thing is that it's over the limit. We're still over the limit. When they instituted the ordinance, there were too many Class A liquor licenses, and they just figured, well, they'll get down to our limit through attrition. And we're getting closer and closer to the limit. And this one came back. He wanted to open a liquor license, and he was not allowed to. And I believe you spoke in favor of it. My biggest concern in this is that at least two of the aldermen were claiming to want to enforce this ordinance. They didn't want to just void the ordinance. And the way they were interpreting the ordinance, it's like they hadn't even read it. Because they were both saying that, well, we have this restriction at 24 and we're over the 24, so why should we be violating our own ordinance and allow another liquor license when we're already over the limit? And the ordinance specifically allows for two provisions that allows you to go over the ordinance. So if they're really following the ordinance, they at least consider the provisions. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Good. I hope it makes sense to you out there too. In other words, they're taking one little part of the ordinance and saying that's the ordinance, and they're following that part. But if they're really following the ordinance, they're following the whole thing.
Well, it's important, I think, to note that the Public Safety and Licensing Committee, according to its chair, again Chairman Wisniewski, did look at the tests, which have one which deals with economic impact, and the other that deals with with buildings and the neighborhood themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was their view, it was the committee's view that that this license application by Mr. Bawinder Singh had failed to meet either of those tests. So while those two aldermen may have made that statement to you at the council meeting, that was not the finding of the committee. The committee's finding was failed to meet the test.
And I understand that from what I saw of many of the council members. They didn't all speak on it, so I can't speak for all of them. But many of them that spoke were considering the test. I mean, the test one, the applicant will show it will have a greater impact on the community than simply the addition of another tavern, liquor store, etc. That's one of the provisions. And the other is the proposed establishment will improve the community by substantially improving the tax base, such as the establishment of by substantially improving a blighted or deteriorated buildings or constructing a new building on vacant land, that type of thing. That's what the whole ordinance is. But it's like saying that if you are caught in a particular neighborhood, you will be executed unless you're proven to be innocent. And then somebody just looks at it and says, well, it says if you're caught in this neighborhood, you're going to be executed, without including the whole thing, unless you're proven innocent, Well, so, and that's what my concern was, is that these aldermen, they sounded so pious in their objection to it. Well, we don't want to go over the 24 because that's what we decided. Wait a minute, that's not the whole ordinance.
I'm going to vote in favor to deny the request. I feel that we set quotas for a reason. If we start changing our quotas, then we might as well rewrite all our ordinances and start from scratch. So obviously we're over by, how many are we over? By 5 now. Where do we stop? Do we start at 35? Do we make an exception at 35 and go to 40? I believe that if the applicant wants to reapply somewhere down the line and a license is open, I have no problem with it. Certainly he seems as a very reputable owner, and I would support it down the line. But if we're over the quota now, I would certainly vote against it. So I would vote to deny the request.
This is going to be the 6th over quota. And if we are going to approve this one, like Alderman Hart said, when does it stop? We need to take this back as a body and talk about this quota then. This is not the place to start, during this vote here. It is currently an ordinance in place right this minute. So this is how we need to be voting on it. I also heard caution and warning from the alderman in the second. There was a caution and warning too, even though I voted purely because this quota was being exceeded by number 6. You know, I don't believe in being exceeded by number 1. You know, if the quota's in place, it's in place for a reason.
If you're going to follow the ordinance, let's follow the whole thing and consider these other two things.
My concern actually is I have some concerns about the ordinance itself.
Good, I do,
This
yes.
ordinance was passed prior to my time on the council. And we have looked at it, you know, and I have supported not exceeding the quota for several other efforts to do so. In this case, I supported the alderman for the district, and I supported the applicant. This is a situation where we have an applicant who has an existing business. Okay, so it's important to look at this as opposed to some of the other ones that have come to the council. This is not somebody who we don't have a track record with, who we don't know about. This is somebody that we have actual experience with. You know,
Right.
a person who owns and operates a business in the community, in the same district. And also owns a business in the second district, as it turns out.
And it's also, there was a store across the street that had a Class A liquor license that closed down.
Right. So we have a liquor store that was across the street, and the owner voluntarily gave up his license.
Right.
We had 17 neighbors provide testimony that they wanted this and that they felt it did have an economic impact on their neighborhood. So the first test, which was that it would have a greater economic impact on the community than simply the addition of another tavern, liquor store, restaurant, etc.
That was possibly met.
That was
That would be a matter of consideration.
and that's certainly an argument. And the argument that the alderman of the first district made, which was supported both by the alderman of the third district and myself. So we're the people who completely encircled this establishment.
Now, I have a quick question for you.
Well, let me just add that
Is this an and or is this an or?
this is an and.
That's what I wrote down, though.
Oh, I believe that either way you can satisfy the test.
It's either one of the things. Yeah, I think it's an or, right. Yeah.
And you know, as I look at this, these 17 neighbors came forward and said, look, we've got people who are disabled, who have great difficulty getting to the big box stores that other people drive out to, you know, the Centuries and the Piggly Wigglies and the Pick and Saves. And you know, we just can't get out there, and we don't want to do shopping at multiple places. We would like the ability and the convenience of going to one grocery store and buying our groceries, and you know, while we're there, picking up, you know, a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of wine, and we ought to have that same level of service as people have in other areas of the city of Racine. It turns out if you're downtown, you know, there aren't grocery stores. We don't have a grocery store in downtown Racine. We would
That got
love to
shut
have
down
one.
because there was no Class A liquor license. Somebody was going to bring in a grocery store onto 6th Street.
Well, I'm not aware of that, but I mean,
But they wouldn't do it because they couldn't get a Class A liquor license.
yeah, however, I suspect that if a large, you know, big box store came in, a Century or a Piggly Wiggly or a Pick and Save and said, we're willing to locate downtown, but we need to have a liquor license to get it, well, that's probably why this second exception was put in,
Yeah.
which is improving the tax base.
In other words, we're not in for the little guy. We just want the big guys coming
Right,
in.
and I'm very concerned about that. I mean, I'm a small business owner in town. I look at nationally, small business accounts for more than 65% of job growth in the U.S. And as we'll talk about later, you know, we're experiencing more job loss in the city of Racine.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
And so, you know, are we encouraging small business to grow and develop? Here's a small businessman who said he would be able to add another employee, and instead of
Only
letting
one?
instead of letting him grow, you know, we've restricted him. And we've restricted him against the wishes of the community. Not one person came forward, either with a letter or a phone call or a appearance at the public hearing to oppose this extension of the quota for Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh has a record of community involvement. Every time people within the community, nonprofits have gone to him and asked for his help, he has been there to provide assistance in the community. We have 17 neighbors who back that up, who said this is a really good person in the neighborhood, this is a good business in the neighborhood, and this is a place I currently do grocery shopping, and at least I was able to go across the street, and pick up wine. Now I can't do that. Now I'm going to have to go to a big box store. I've got to ride the bus to get there. And by the way, you guys cut the bus service down. So it's almost impossible for me to get to the products I want to get to. So here's somebody who's coming in and saying, I can meet the needs of the community. Okay? And there is a new community need for that. When you combine loss of bus service and the fact that the establishment across the street is no longer in business, and then you add into that the fact that this person is respected in the community as a community contributor. There were 17 neighbors who took time out of their day to come down and testify at a committee meeting. And then add to that the number of people who spoke at the council meeting when this was decided. Overall, while I understand the argument against, okay, I certainly see the rationale behind the argument. Okay, I don't think it was the right solution, and that's why I supported extending this quota for this establishment, as did the alderman for the other for the district that the business is located in, and the other alderman for the district that also abuts this business on the other side. So between the three of us, we have a responsibility for the neighborhoods that are all around this establishment. And our constituents all spoke out in favor. I didn't receive one call opposing this, and I did receive contact from people saying that they wanted this in. So if you have the neighbors want it, a businessman's willing to take the risk on offering the product and adding staff, and this is a person who's had community involvement and who has developed the respect of the neighborhood. Seems to me that this would have been a good opportunity for us to extend this. And when you realize that in all likelihood, had it been a big box store, we wouldn't have hesitated a moment to exceed the quota. It just seems that it's unfair to smaller business people who have made an investment in our community.
Thank you for that, Alderman. I really agree with you on that. It's time to relax on that, trust the people a little bit more. We're not all going to be out there, as Alderman Wisniewski was concerned about, we're not all going to be just drinking more and all get pickled because of this letting somebody else have a Class A liquor license. All right, so let's take a break and come back and talk about jobs.